Welcome to an episode of Coffee in the Library. Today we'll be dealing with the topic, I'm not yet married and it hurts. My name is Chikondi Tembo and I'm joined with Pastor Sibale. So just some ground rules of the discussion. It's not going to be empty cliches. There's not going to be empty platitudes. We're going deep into this topic, the practicality of it, how it affects us. And hopefully you gain something, you learn how to be happier or better in your singleness. So let's dive right in. So Pastor Sibale, the first question that we'll ask is, why is marriage such a big deal? In society, how it's talked about, every family reunion, they're asking, when are you getting married? So why is it such a big deal?
All right, thank you very much. It's good to be here after a while, and let's get on with the topic and deal with it as much as we can, and to anchor everything in the scriptures. Now, marriage holds a very unique and profound significance in the Bible, and when you read the Bible, it's treated with the seriousness that it deserves, and it sets it apart from any other human relationship. Now, there are four things I want to highlight just to help the viewers appreciate this, and please permit me a bit of latitude, just in case I take a bit of time, but just allow me to do that. The first thing I want us to have in mind is that marriage is a divine institution. Mm-hmm. Now, what I mean by that is that marriage is created by God. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 18 to 24, God introduces marriage. When God created Adam, he put him in the garden, and in chapter 2 of Genesis, we see Eve being brought to Adam, and God establishing the purpose for marriage. And under the divine institution, you've seen created by God, but also see that it has its own sacred purpose. And like any other human relationship, friendships, sibling bonds, parent-child bond, marriage is explicitly instituted by God with a specific structure and intent. In Genesis 2, verse 24, it says, "A man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, or hold fast to his wife, and the two become one flesh." Now that's a purpose, that's a structure, that's the intent. So we need to bear in mind, it's a divine institution. But secondly, marriage is a covenant. And by covenant, we mean it has a binding commitment. Again, in the Bible, marriage is not merely a contract, as people want us to hear. It's a covenant, a sacred, long life commitment made before God in the witness of, or in the company of many. But also we see that when we talk about it being covenant, a binding commitment, it's also distinct from any other relationships. No other human relationship, friendships, partnerships, siblings, or parent-child relationship, they all lack this covenant weight that the Bible puts on marriage, and this sacredness rather, or this language that is used to highlight marriage. The third thing is that marriage is a symbol of the church and Christ, or Christ and the church. And in that symbol, we see there's this theological picture that we're given, and this takes us to Ephesians 5, 22 to 33, where in that portion of the scripture, the Bible portrays marriage as a picture, a living picture of Christ's relationship with the church. Husbands are commanded or called to love their wives as Christ loves the church, or should I say, to love their wives sacrificially as Christ loves the church. And the wives are called or commanded to submit to their husbands as the church submits to Christ. So there's this theological picture. But also, again, there's a unique function that we see in that picture of Christ and the church. And the picture is that of the gospel. And Paul says this is a profound mystery in Ephesians 5, verse 33. He's tying marriage to the gospel. And the fourth thing is that it's the role of marriage in God's plan for humanity. Fruitfulness and stewardship is tied to marriage. In Genesis 1:28, God commands Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply, tying marriage to the creation of life and stewardship of the earth. Now, while not all marriages will produce children, but this mandate underscores that marriage, or underscores marriage's role in God's creative order. And then marriage also serves as sanctification. It is in the context of marriage where both husband and wives are helping each other be more like Christ, experiencing or expressing forgiveness, love, sacrificial love for one another. And no other human relationship does that. And then when we think of the role of marriage in God's plan for humanity, we also see that the moral and ethical standards. Marriage comes with specific biblical commands. When it talks about faithfulness, Hebrews 13 verse 4, do not defile the marriage bed. Faithfulness. There's a mutual submission, Ephesians 5:21. And then there's also love. Colossians 3 verse 19, husband, love your wives. And again, all this is tied into a marriage relationship. So if you want to think about the seriousness, that is a seriousness of marriage. And the Bible has a lot to say.
Okay, so this is let's give a picture of a viewer who listens and says, okay, what you're saying sounds like it just applies to Christian. I'm Muslim, I'm atheist, I don't believe like that. So is there any evidence that goes to show that that reality, the divine, the covenant, and all these things that are portrayed in scripture is present even if they choose to deny it? So even if I'm Muslim, we follow this, but the evidence of all that is still present even in the way you look, view marriage, and even the way that you pursue it.
That's there. It's there. Even if, let's say, we remove the Bible. When you talk about the moral and the ethical standards, no husband, no wife wants to share their husband or wife with everyone. Just from an ethical standard. So already, marriage shows there's this, it's an exclusive relationship. So even if you say, okay, the Bible, let's not use the Bible, that's up to you. But you could actually say, when someone marries, they are saying to the whole world, I don't want to share this woman or with this man with the rest of the world. She's off the shelves. You see that. But the issue of children, a man or a woman who goes around having children all over the world, he is looked at one who's loose. And it's animals that behave like that.
Yeah.
But human beings, when they produce children, they want to take care of them. But also, society itself will tell us that there's a way in which children must come, and it's through the marriage bond.
Yeah. So the evidence morally doesn't also what if marriage wasn't that big of a deal, people wouldn't make such a big deal about adultery, wouldn't make even laws that allow for in issues to do with provocation on infidelity. It's like, okay, no, this because there's infidelity will give them a lesser sentence in terms of crimes. Even just generally, the way I remember I was listening to a story once. So this was something on social media. These people had been cohabiting for about close to 10 years. And then they mentioned that, why don't you just get married? And it's like, no, we're not yet ready for that. It's like, you've been living together for 10 years. Why is this marriage seem to be something that's not just as simple as just, oh, we're living together and we're in love and we're living. So yeah, like society does already treat it with the seriousness that it has.
Exactly. So you find cohabiting for 10 years. Even they knew that we are not married, because that step of commitment is not there. So they know that as long as we are loosely living together, when I'm fed up, I can leave. But when I say I'm marrying this person, there's a sense of commitment and seriousness attached to that move. And so all these show us about this seriousness of marriage. Yeah.
Okay. So because we're looking particularly, I'm not yet married, and it hurts.
Yeah.
Before we go and start addressing the pain and what is around the pain, firstly, as you have defined what marriage is, why it's so serious, who qualifies as a single?
All right. Well, that's interesting. Sometimes I take things for granted that the terms mean the same thing to everyone. But when you look at the Bible, in the context of the Bible, like again, as I said, I'll anchor everything in the Bible. We'll use examples and that, but my final authority is the Bible. Now, in biblical context, the concept of being single is not defined with the terms that we use in that sense. But when you look at the Bible, marriage relationships, or let me say, the Bible primarily addresses marital status and roles in terms of being married, unmarried, or widowed or betrothed. That's what those are the terms that the Bible uses, and each with implications for singleness and things like that. So, for instance, in 1 Corinthians 7, where the Apostle Paul is addressing different categories, he addresses the unmarried. And in that sense, it's those who've never been married. They are considered singles. Now, in the Bible, the language was often unmarried or virgins. That's the term that is used. So those who've never been married before. But also again, in 1 Corinthians 7, there are those who are widows or widowers. Their spouse dies. And because of the death of the spouse, they are left in a state of singleness. They've been married before, but their spouse dies. So there are those unmarried who've never married before, those who've married before, then the spouse dies. They are widows or widowers. So that some prefer to remain in that state, others are given the leeway. The Bible gives us that leeway to marry. And then also there are those divorced individuals. Now I need to be very careful here, because I know there are different interpretations on whether one who's divorced can marry or not. But I'm not going to anchor my answer on Matthew 19, verse 9, where it just talks about divorce, or Mark 10. But I'll anchor it on 1 Corinthians 7 and verse 15. And in 1 Corinthians 7:15, Paul suggests that if an unbelieving spouse leave the believer is not bound, because it's the unbelieving spouse who's left, and therefore potentially qualifying them as single, and they can remarry, because it's not them who initiated the divorce. So like I said, I'm very careful because of the different interpretation, but my anchor, 1 Corinthians 17, so they're divorced. Those who are divorced, they qualify as single in that sense, using 1 Corinthians 7:15. But there are also those who are betrothed or engaged. The modern term is engaged. So those who are betrothed or engaged, in the times of the Bible, betrothal or commitment or engagement was a very serious commitment. And Deuteronomy 22, verses 23 and 24 gives us the seriousness. So they were still considered single, because they're not yet living together with their spouse or their would-be wife or husband, but there was a serious commitment to enter the marriage relationship. So even those, they were considered single. Example, Joseph and Mary. Mary was single when she was found to be with child, being brought about by the Holy Spirit. So there was this commitment, but still qualified as single. And then there are those who choose to be single because of their calling or the service to God. So there are these broad categories, but the Bible simply talk about the unmarried, the widowed, the betrothed, and the divorced.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are there any, in the idea of who qualifies as single, are there any things that you've noticed in our culture, current practice, that because people, so for example, I'm in a relationship, I want to go around and say I'm single, right? But have you noticed how maybe having a false perception of who's single, who's taken, who's what has affected the way we live, both as Christians, but even as a society?
Yes, in the sense that for you who's in a relationship, while it's true you're single, the moment you say I'm single, it has its own connotations. Because for others, the moment they hear someone is single, it's like this person is a potential husband, you see. So everyone begins to throw themselves. So people are very cautious when they say I'm single and that. Others would say I'm single but in a committed relationship. Again, which is just really, really confusing. But I think if we use the biblical language or the culture of the Bible, they will talk of, in your case, you will talk of you are in a committed relationship. You're betrothed. You've already passed the stage of looking, you found. Now, what you're just waiting is that day when you make that commitment before God and everyone else. So, the period you're in is you are doing everything possible to ensure that you enter the marriage bond. Yeah. And then there are others who will be engaged or committed to someone, but still thinking they've not arrived. Looking at possibility. So that sense or that picture, the misunderstanding creates even more confusion.
Yeah. Are there any like negative effects that you have seen? Like things that because of those, maybe misconceptions, you're seeing practices that have developed that are like destroying people or like making them make wrong decisions, or anything of that nature?
I was trying to use a Bemba phrase, but I can't think of the English equivalent. There's a phrase that in Kobekelate Chupo. Now, I don't know if you've got better words to translate.
No, wrong person to ask.
But really, if I could try and help, it's basically saying the fact that you are engaged, it's not yet marriage. Now, what that does is that a person who is in a serious relationship may be given loosely some leeway to do many other wrong things, as long as it's not with this person you want to marry. Because these ones are being reserved for marriage.
I see.
Yeah, so I get the point. So because of that, sometimes it's so embedded in us that we don't think through. But because of that misconception, people will find, okay, yeah, this is the person I want to marry. But I don't want to marry that one. I don't want to marry that. Therefore, I can misbehave with those and then still come and marry the person I want to marry. So that's a wrong sort of misconception. Rather than saying, this is the one I want to marry, and therefore I focus all my energies in this person and make them a wife. Yeah.
Could you give like some like more examples of the same? Like how do they misbehave? So I'm imagining someone who maybe has got some issues, like watching their partners, like I'm uncomfortable with the way they behave, the way they talk to certain people and the like, but I'm not 100% sure this is something that I should take as like, no, this is a red flag. This is something that I should just immediately leave. In what ways do people say, I'm going to marry this person, but I'm going to misbehave? What are they doing?
Yeah, for instance, one is flirting with others. Like you've already set your eyes on this one, this is what I want to marry. But you're looking around, trying to compare. In what sense do they bring a sense of excitement in me, which it doesn't? Maybe this person is reserved, no, that one is quiet, that one pushes my intellectual limit. So, while this one is the one I want to marry, when I want to have an intellectual conversation, that one, know those things, or to say, what I was thinking of a term which has just run out of my mind. I hope it comes at some point. but the thing is, it's a term, wife material. That's what I was. Yeah. Okay, this one is wife material. That one is not. That one is not. That one is not. So I can flirt with that one. He can talk about all wrong things. That one I can. Well, with the sinfulness, we can even end up sleeping together. But this one is wife material. It's for me to marry and bring home. That one I can't bring to my parents. They'll say no. But this one, you get the point. So this person is the one you present to the world. I want to marry and make a wife. Those others, I dare not bring them near my mother.
And so just a quick one. So in such situations, people who are in those, they can see clearly that there's offness in, maybe they've checked through phones, they've found how people are talking, maybe they've seen in person. What would be your advice? Just a quick.
Yeah, for me, it's if there is, you've got all this information, talk to the person. If I'm betrothed to someone, let's have that conversation. If there are these concerns, let's talk. If the two of you can't resolve them, bring in mature individuals that you both trust to try and help, so that in an event that one side is just overlooking certain things, then they are helped. But the problem with bad habits or sinful tendencies, they tend to grow. So the person might end up in a marriage relationship with such tendencies, and therefore they'll just continue to grow. So they need help immediately. Yeah.
Okay. So the reason why I went down that tangent is because we had talked about it. Betrothed people also still qualify as single, and they can be paying, right? And even just being in such a place where someone is doing that, you're being paid.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
You're not yet married and you're in pain.
Okay. But you're committed to that.
But you're committed. Yeah. So let's move on to the next question. So before we even go into the pain of it, just what keeps people single? Why are some people single longer than others? What keeps people there?
That's a very interesting question. Now, people stay single for a mix of personal, psychological, philosophical reasons. And all these are intertwined in people. One of the reasons, we'll just try and whatever I can remember to just highlight, and that being picky. And what I mean is, high standards. You've said very high standards. And these high standards, especially when one is looking for a partner, and again, I'm using partner because that's a common term that viewers probably will identify with. A partner who checks every box. Career, check. Looks, check. Values, check. And something I often hear a lot from young people, the chemistry.
Yeah.
No, there's no chemistry. So they're looking for, so they're picky, they're looking to check every box. Now, granted, for some, this stems from self-awareness or past experience, trauma, broken relationships, and therefore they sort of try to narrow down and be picky. But by doing that, they're overlooking potential compatible partners in the process. And studies have shown, being a pastor, sometimes you read things that you ordinarily would not want to read because some questions that come from young people or other people are very interesting. Yeah. So studies do show that people that are picky tend to be single longer, or salamin for life, simply because they feel that there's no one who ticks their boxes. And they're looking for one who will match either 100% or 99.9%. And therefore, even one who has 98 or 97,
they're off.
Yes, they're off. That's one. The other one is just a fear of settling. You just don't want to settle. you, because of this fear, you are paralyzed to make a decision.
Yeah.
What if she doesn't turn out to? What if, those things. And again, this is tied to a paradox of choice.
Yeah.
When you feel that you've got a euphoria of choices, you fail to make a choice. Because you feel that I've got 100 possibilities. So because of that, you suffer from a failure to make a choice. So a fear of settling. And then there's another one, which is this wanting someone who will just blow you off your feet. You watch a movie and you see this guy. Well, he's not like you. He has long hair. Well built, tall, all those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And then this lady just swept off their feet, or this guy just swept off the feet by the beauty of this woman. And so these romantic movies or romantic media paint this picture that sets the standard very high.
Very high. Yeah.
And because of that, most of them are just waiting for that moment of intense, immediate spark and being swept. And because of that, they fail to sort of make a decision. And studies show that relationships that are built slowly, gradually, last longer than relationships that are based on this initial passion. But the sad reality is that most single prefer the latter than the former, where instead of patiently building a relationship over a long haul, you just want that moment of intense, immediate spark, and you're swept off your feet. Yeah, studies show that most of those, it's like a candle where you light it from both ends.
To
Burn, produces a lot of light, but short-lived.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And then the other idea for those who are religious, it's the sovereignty of God.
Interesting.
And and oh boy,
Yeah.
they hide a lot in this. No, God is sovereign, and if God wanted me to have a wife, God will bring a wife. Now, while that brings a sense of inner peace,
Yeah.
it also creates a spirit of being passive. Instead of you purposefully pursuing a marriage relationship with prayer, crying out to God, being proactive. What is it that you want in your would-be wife or husband? You just are passive. Now, in life, we're not like that. You just don't say, okay, I've studied accounts. If God wants me to have a job will come. No, you go looking.
Yeah.
Applying, dropping application. Now it's email. You just email your CV and says that those recruitment agents, you send your CV. You're not being passive. You're active. Now, why do you want it to be like that when it comes to marriage?
Yeah.
Even the most handsome guys, like myself, we had to look for.
They didn't just show up.
No. They didn't show up. We had to tell them, yeah, we're here. Look at us. Look at our way. You see, we dressed up in certain ways to try and see if we could market ourselves. So the sovereignty of God should not be at the expense of human responsibility.
Yeah. Okay. So in these, just like a quick mirror.
Yeah.
How can someone identify? Okay, at this point, I qualify in this section. I'm too picky, or I qualify. I'm afraid of settling, or I'm in this paradox of choice. I qualify. I'm busy believing, no, God is sovereign, and instead I'm just actually being passive. Like, what are some of the markers that you'd see?
Well, if you're one who's supposed to marry and don't have a wife, maybe most likely.
what qualifies as if you're one who's supposed to marry?
Well, I think one of the things that you you really need to look at is, firstly, if you have a desire to marry, what are some of the things you've done about it? Do you prayerfully take that matter before God? Because God is the one who created those emotional feelings or longings to have a partner or a marriage partner. So have you actively taken those matters to God? Have you actively shared with your close friends? Have you actively considered what kind of a wife do you want to have? And if you've actively done that, you've looked at, okay, God, this is what I would want to see in my would-be wife. Lead me to one. Have you done that? Or is it just seated? Or no? And things like that. That's one side of looking at it. The other could be being picky. Is the things that you are looking for really based on what the Bible says or guides? Or it's really the cultural norms or the society norms that have been created as you've been growing?
Yeah.
For instance, in terms of career, have you always wanted to marry a doctor because you feel it's going to add to your CV or to your how people view you? Or why is it that you want a wife who is an accountant or a doctor or a lawyer? What exactly is driving you?
I want to introduce my wife, a doctor.
Versus no, she's just a homemaker. You know those things.
Yeah.
So you need to look at those things and really examine yourself. What is it that is keeping you in that state? And then quickly, the last one is sometimes it's just you are working or you've got a source of income. What are you still waiting for? There are the young people that I feel, no, but don't think should be a good wife or be a good husband. What if I change? What do you mean? We all change. Man, I mean, when I was in my 20s when I was marrying, I'm now in my 40s. I don't think I'm the same. So it's life on earth, we change. But the point is there are those fundamentals that are like the foundation.
Yeah.
And those must be there. So ask yourself, am I failing to make that step of faith? And what is it that is holding me?
Okay.
Yeah.
So in light of all this, so these are single people, they're picking, they're dealing with all these things. Is there a reason why they should really make the effort? So it's like, okay, this sounds like a lot of work, it's fine, right? Let marriage skip me. So in short, is there a reason to regret being single for the rest of your life if you don't have the gift of singleness?
Of course, firstly, you desire to marry. So that desire will not die with age.
Interesting.
As you grow in age, the desire grows. And so regret about being single forever also depends on your individual perspective and life goals. If you desire to marry, pursue that. Prayerfully pursue, seek advice, seek counsel, pursue it. Now, there are others who sort of thrive in being alone. Maybe the Lord has called them to be single. And so they find fulfillment in being independent, having hobbies, friendships that don't tie them or don't have as much demands as marriage. And a study was shown somewhere, a study rather not shown, done in the States, which shows that 20 to 25% of people in their 40s, 50s in the States are more happier alone. Now that's 20 to 25%.
Interesting.
While the same study also revealed that singles in their 50s and above regret on the missed opportunities of having a life partner. So again, the weight or the regret is dependent on whether the Lord has given you a desire to marry and you just don't want. Or the Lord has called you. to be single. And if the Lord has called you, the Lord enables you to find fulfillment in that state. Just as if the Lord has called you to marry, He gives you the grace to look, find, and be happy.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So then let's proceed to the next question. What are some of the things? So this is okay. We are single. We're not yet married, meaning that even in the position of betrothal, you could leave.
Yeah.
You see things that you don't like, you can leave. What are some of the things that you can see in someone as signs to say, okay, I shouldn't marry this person? And especially from the perspective of things that are not easily spotted. Certain things. So this is from your experience as counseling married people, your experience as being married. What are some of the things that it's very easy for single people to overlook that will come and heavily bite them in marriage, but they could have spotted them while they were engaged? So what are some of those things?
Yeah. You see, when you've been relating with someone closely for some time, there are certain things that begin to pop up. You cannot pretend forever.
Yeah.
Maybe the first few months you can, but life comes in real life. So some of the poor characters or some of the things that you need to look out for is, for instance, someone who's dishonest, someone who's unkind, or someone who's manipulative. Now, if you overlook these things, these are behaviors that can make you regret when you marry them because they undermine things like trust, your own happiness and the happiness, shared values or goals or responsibilities. Now, a person who shows these tendencies, chances are higher that they'll behave like that even in marriage, because they're manipulative, they're dishonest, and things like that. But then there are also certain things that I say that if they are not a character defect, but just a result of maybe, of course, a sinful nature and something prompts you to react in that way,
Yeah.
it will not, most likely won't repeat itself. But if it's a character defect, that's how the person is. They may pretend, but the real personality or the real you that makes you will come out at some point. And so those are the things that one needs to look for. Dishonest and manipulative, one who frequently lies. These are things that you need to look at. And there are a lot that you could mention. But let me just amplify on manipulative practices.
Yeah.
A lot of young girls have ended up finding themselves in a situation where they are manipulated in sleeping with a guy without realizing that, or they were pressured into a decision. So you've heard a lot of guys say, no, if you love me, prove it.
Yeah.
And I've told you I love you, so what else do you want me to prove? You get the point?
Yeah.
But the guy is saying, no, if you love me, let's go sleep together. Let's be having these sexual relations. But what I tell young girls that if the love is patient, so if the guy truly loves you, let him marry you. Then nothing stops you from sleeping with one another. But a guy who says, no, prove if you love me, sleep with me as a proof of marriage, love. It's a very manipulative move. It's self-centered, not in the interest of the other person. What do they think? What do they feel? Why am I forcing them to make a decision that is against them?
Yeah.
Marry them. That would be enough proof of love for them. So there's a lot, but I think those sort of come out.
Yeah. So this is coming back to like unkind, right? Because I'm trying to picture what are some of the things, maybe you have come across certain cases where it's like the unkindness that you're showing in the relationship this is how it has now manifested in marriage. Like, what are some ways in which someone's unkindness, you can see it like this will probably become like this in marriage? Like, could you pinpoint some of those things?
Like being unkind.
Yes.
So one of the things about being unkind is a person who do not really regard how you feel. Okay, so it's about them.
Yeah.
They want to twist any given situation so that it's about them. So even in a case where there was shared tasks or responsibilities, they want to be the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And such that when they're now in a marriage relationship,
Yeah.
that unkindness might show itself in things like the person has done something wrong. Instead of apologizing, they're like, no, you're too sensitive.
Interesting.
They're unkind to how you feel. But they want to twist and say, no, you're too sensitive, or no, this is just the way I am.
Yeah.
What do you mean this is the way you are? You've injured someone's feeling.
Yeah.
Apologize and then begin to work at that. So there are those things that show up. And they may not make you a priority. So yes, I have a wife. You stay home. I will go do A, B, C, D, and I'll come. They don't regard what you think, how you feel. So that's one way, or one of the many ways. Should I say that?
Yeah, actually, that even reminds me of there's certain instances where you hear ladies complaining. It's like, it's making me feel like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
I'm coming and telling you, you're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this, and it says all these other things. And I'm just like, am I seeing things? Like, that should be just like, based off what you've said, it's a clear sign that you don't want to marry this person.
Yeah.
This person who is making you feel like you're crazy for bringing up things that they're doing wrong, and they're making you feel as if they will not be a good spouse.
Exactly, because they don't care what you think.
Yeah.
And they are manipulative as well.
Yeah. Okay. So now let's go into the main aspect of the topic. So we have given why marriage has got this seriousness, right? Because it's from this seriousness that we see a lot of, like, why it impacts us so as human beings. Even people who say, no, I'm not Christian, and like we share in this impact, because that's how it was designed by God, the one true creator. And so even as we have gone through all these topics, all these areas of singleness, what makes us single, what keeps us single, what we should be looking for, and the like, we are now in singleness at different stages. And this is people who don't have someone, want to get married, and then number of people who complain that it hurts. I'm in pain. People have called it an affliction, the affliction of singleness.
Yeah.
There are people who, when they enter relationships, and I don't think this is a very talked about area, because it would be weird for you to say, no, I'm in a relationship. Yeah, I've found someone who I want to marry, but I'm still in pain. I want to get married to this person, and that hurts quite a lot. People who are widowed, people who are legitimately divorced, and whatever area of singleness, there's pain that's experienced in those places. And so the first question around this pain is, what are some of the reasons why this pain exists? Firstly, I'll start with this. Do you think the pain is natural? Is it like it's because this is a stage of life, of course you'll be in pain? Or is it that there's other elements around it that make us not realize that the pain is not a natural pain? It's caused by something else. So what are some of the things that you think?
Yeah. I'm thinking of the word pain, and I'm saying to myself, when we talk about pain, it has a different connotation in people's minds, depending on how they understand the word pain. Or maybe to look at it another way, a person who's graduated from the university or from a college and has no job, are they going through pain? Is that stage of joblessness painful? Is that how we're using pain, or is it a phase, or is it a stage where you want to have a job, you can't have a job, and then there's frustration? So I hope you get my confusion as I'm hearing the question. But in trying to relate it to what we are looking at, the pain, let's run with the word pain.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the sense of a longing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's like you've realized that there's a void in me that seem not to be satisfied by any other thing I have.
Yeah.
And therefore, I want this. But before we get to that, we need to realize as Christians, first and foremost, our identity and value is not in what we have, but it is what has been done to us by Christ.
Yeah.
So whether married or not, married or single, we have value in Christ. And that's why I must start. Because if you don't appreciate that, any created things, including marriage, will not satisfy. But once we appreciate that, then we look at everything we have, including marriage and many other things, as a gift from the source of love, God Himself. Now, coming to that, so that we don't appear like too heavenly minded, but now coming to that is the fact that the aspect of loneliness and isolation is a real thing. The absence of this connection at that level is a real thing. And this can lead to feelings of disconnection, or feeling like there's something lacking in you, because there's this deep desire that God creates in you. So whether never been married or you're divorced, God has created us as social beings. And within that realm of social beings, there is the general where we just have casual friendships, I could use that. Then there's a more committed, close, knit friends, people that are more like family, brothers, and in that sense. And then there's that exclusive relationship of a husband and a wife. So all these stages are part of the human life. So if the Lord has given you a gift of desiring marriage, you may have all these, but once that is not there, there's a sense in which you look forward to having that. And so the pain is this aspect of loneliness, even in the midst of many other friendships. Why?
Yeah.
Because it hits different nerves, as it were. Yeah.
Okay. So you have stated that there is something inbuilt that would cause a pain in regards to, in particular, loneliness, because we have been given this desire to be married. We want to be with someone in close companionship, and as long as that longing is there, right, we will experience a loneliness, a discomfort.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of, you have many friends, you have family, but you're still uncomfortable. So to what degree, or where do we not say, okay, your pain is a little too much, right? It's like, no, that's not normal. Like, we are all feeling pain, but you have got a little bit overboard.
Yeah.
How do we spot such a person who you are saying, who you are going to and saying, like, there's pain, and then there's you who we need to pray for. Yeah. How can you spot such a person?
Yeah, again, that's very interesting angle. I think it's if now marriage becomes the all-consuming desire, such that you miss out on what God is doing in the moment. So it's like you've set a target, you've set a goal. As long as I'm not there, everything else doesn't make sense. It's like I'm going to Kitwe. As long as I'm not yet in Kitwe, Kabwe, Ndola, Kapiri, that's not my destination. Now, this marriage desire become the all-consuming passion and desire for you, then we may say, no, I think you need to have a balanced view of everything. Now, it's not wrong, but now if that becomes the all-consuming passion of God, it's like until I have a wife or a husband, nothing makes sense. Then we need to help the person see that God, who's given you this desire, has also given you a number of things, like what you're enjoying now, the company of friendship, building other areas of your life before this happens. And that's one side. The other side is, there are those who feel like they've advanced in years.
Yeah.
And then the pool of potential within their age group is sort of shrinking.
Yeah.
And now they begin to think, no, until I get, it doesn't matter. They begin to drop all their standards and desires, or what it is they want in the would-be husband or wife. That becomes a danger, because you may end up having a husband, as one would say, husband, and a wife who becomes a knife, because you've dropped everything, all objectivity. You've just become subjective. I want to have a wife or a husband. Now that is a worry, because at that point, any kind of counsel is not helping, because you just want this goal. Yeah.
Okay, so the pain, the intense pain, is mostly caused by this overwhelming fixation on marriage and finding this partner. That the longing, which is normal, now becomes like too much.
Yeah.
The loneliness, which is normal, now becomes too much. It's like you have looked at it with a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
It's all your focus. Okay, so with that idea of the pain and its source being this heavy fixation on marriage, and I can assume, looking at the single, it must not be easy to have this focused, no, like I'm focusing on the Lord. I'm healthily designed, when everyone is asking, when are you getting married? When the jokes being passed, and you are watching so many people get married. Are there any remedies to this? No. Now, remedies coming from these two fronts.
Yeah.
One, from your own experience, before you got married, during that period of time, I don't know if you can go a little bit more in detail, like how long were you single for? Okay, let me not say that, because that was like your whole life until you got married. But like, how long were you in the marriageable age, when marriage was like now a possibility, idea-wise, it doesn't even have to be financial. Like, within the marriageable age, were you single before you got married? Were there any instances during that period of time where you either struggled or you found it odd that you're not struggling? Like, how was your experience during that period of time?
All right. To be as frank as I can, and as I would be, not as I can, but as I would be, is that if I look back, perhaps maybe between 7-8 years is a stage I'd look at as when, like you said, marriageable age, from being a teen and also working and all those things. Now, when I look back within those 8 years.
So this is 8 years before you got married?
Yes, before I got married. So that's like a period. Yeah, that period of 8 years, one of the things I did with my friends, Graham, Noel, Billy, John, that kind of group, is that we used to ask ourselves questions. What is it that you'd want in your would-be wife? And in asking those questions, also ensuring that we'll be the kind of husbands we need to be. And so we would answer using my accounting background, a T account. On the left, non-negotiables. On the right, negotiables. So a Christian, and for me, it was a Christian, must have been a Christian for more than 3 years.
Interesting.
Now that was non-negotiable. That's me.
Why? So just since I've talked about being picky.
I was being picky. Yeah, because at that point for me, I was already sensing a call to ministry.
I see.
And I said that I want someone who has the fundamentals of the faith in that sense. So it could have been more for selfish reasons. Yeah. But then I also wanted someone hospitable and sociable, if there's such a term. So that my home should be a place where people feel welcome. Whether I'm there or not, my wife is able to attend to visitors and make everyone feel welcome. And for me, I was very clear in my mind, they need to be Reformed Baptist. I wasn't going to negotiate because of this spiritual compatibility, but the Bible said marry in the Lord.
Yeah.
But that was for me. And the negotiable part, if I found these, I was willing to negotiate. How many years difference? My wife and I think is a 5 years difference or so. How many years? Is she from Kabwata or Lusaka Baptist? What's her career? Is she tall? She short? Light? Dark? I was willing to negotiate those, provided I found the non-negotiables. That was one thing we did and talked about that. And also within our group said, whenever any one of us begin to feel or begin to see the sights that dazzle, immediately inform your friends so that they find that for you before you make that jump. So that all these things we're talking about are not just theoretical, but we are actually implementing them. And then in the meantime, I did engage with the church. What I mean engage is I was very active in the life of the church, making friends, talking to people, reading books, even praying. It's a serious matter. We need to pray. There were times when I would feel like, okay, maybe that's the one. And then when my friends come in, they were like, no, looking at your character and that person's character are not compatible. Now, in as much as I would have loved to go that route, but because I also had these friends that would speak truthfully in my life, it made me at least to avoid making a fool of myself. So those were considerations. And then maybe within those 8 years I talked about, maybe 3 of those years I seriously began to ask questions. Whether, okay, so I've got all these friends, female friends. How is it that I don't seem to incline to one? Could it be that I'm being picky? Could it be that I'm being heavily dependent on God's sovereignty and not doing my own human responsibility? So there were those considerations that were made.
Okay, so just like diving into a little bit of the 8 years. So how long did it, or could you remember? Was it like throughout the 8 years, how long did it take for you to reach a point where it's like, okay, I've come up with my negotiables, non-negotiables. Like, was it an easy thing? Like the whole setup, because so I'm picturing a single who's now entered this marriageable age period. So let's say they are 21, they are 22. How long does it take for them to reach a point where they're saying at least passable, right? Like at least you have got a passing grade. Okay, I have built myself enough to enter a relationship with someone, because some of the time, some things that we say is, I'm not yet ready. So while we're in pain, while we experience loneliness, it's like, I'm not yet ready to accommodate someone. I still need to grow. Like, how long did it take you in particular to reach a point where it's like, okay, I've grown enough that I can accommodate someone else. I've figured out my list enough that I can search like objectively well. I'm not chasing after things I shouldn't. I'm not ignoring things that I shouldn't ignore. How long in those 8 years?
I'm not so sure. Maybe in those maybe 3, like I said, the 3 of those years I seriously thought about that and began asking myself questions. But also what I was doing was to hold myself accountable to people I respected. And there was this relationship. So there were men that I could go on and ask, do you think I'm ready for a relationship? It's because they've known me for some time. So some would say, no, I don't think so, not now. Maybe focus on what is immediate, God and career. And then the other times now they're like, okay, now I think you seriously need to begin thinking. So there were those men that were in my life. But I remember I always wanted to marry at 21.
Interesting.
I always wanted to marry at 21. I don't know why. Maybe I had a good example of marriage from my parents. But when I look at myself now and me at 21, I would have been a disaster. I would have been a disaster. Opinionated, always wanting to have my way. So I think the Lord needed to deal with me in those areas that I was able to accommodate another person and be mindful of their feelings and what they think and take criticism or feedback from them. But also, tied side by side was also working on career progression. When I say I'm ready, what is it? Do I have the means to take care of another person's life? In this case, a wife. And now I'm not talking about having a huge mansion, but do I have a place where I can take this person and begin life from there and working towards something together? Mentally, emotionally, and then also maturity or mature-wise, do they have all those things? To be a husband who this lady can look up to and be proud of. Those are things that I had to look and seriously search myself. And so all these feedbacks that I was receiving was now building me into this. And so for the young people out there, ask just someone you respect or a friend, ask them, do you think I can be a husband today? Let them point out the areas you need to work at. But then also ask yourself, would I be a kind of husband that my wife can proudly introduce me to her friends and her relatives? If the answer is no, then there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And being ready should not be looked at the kind of job that I have and how much I'm getting. But mentally, emotionally, spiritually, am I ready, and do I have a place where we can begin with this lady?
Okay. So we've spoken about a lot of things. Just in you diving, there are a number of things that you have mentioned that would actually help out with the experience of the pain. One of the things is that the amount of time that you need to actually put into becoming ready, dealing with yourself, learning the kind of person you should be with. It's not a week's endeavor, and it's not even an individual endeavor. It requires a group of friends, a group of men who you trust, who you can be in close connection with. And so just from that, if you're experiencing like a lot of pain in this area, some of the questions just like, have you done that? Like, have you spent a lot of time into trying to polish yourself into the kind of person that your wife or husband will be proud of? And do you even know who you should be with? In terms of like the non-negotiables, the negotiables, and are you certain your non-negotiables are that important and your negotiables are things you should actually consider? That period of learning and discovery is very important. It would take a couple of years even. But another thing that was mentioned is in terms of how like you're creating the means to actually, for a man especially, you're creating the means to actually take care of this person. You're building yourself character-wise, but you're also building yourself in your capacity financially. It will also take quite a bit of time. Are there any other things, any other remedies to a very grueling pain where people are going to bed, they're crying, people can't be even in conversation with certain people because every time they're asked about spouses, it's a heavy trigger? Are there any other remedies that can cure the pain of being not yet married?
Yeah. Realize that singleness can be a rich, fulfilling phase of life. And it's normal to face those struggles. Because it's like one who's graduated and don't have a job. People, when I'm getting a job, that's it. And it's not like you're not trying. It's not, But just know that singleness can be a rich, fulfilling phase of life. It's normal to have those struggles. But the key is to address those pain points or those X with intentional actions while building a life you love presently or currently. Have have relationship with friends and others in the community of faith, the church, where you're having this meaningful relationship considering your current state.
Yeah.
But if you feel that all those challenges are overwhelming, seek support or counseling from your church elders or leaders or mature Christians to just help you as you face those things. Because you find that in talking to some of them they may not announce, but probably they married late in life. So they know the challenges. They can help you navigate. And then there are those by God's grace who married earlier. So it's not one size fits all.
Yeah.
So seek and talk. And also your leaders, your elders, perhaps know people who've been through your situation and they can connect you with them. And then you can talk at that level, knowing that they're out there, and then they can sort of help you in that situation. And then there are others who've had it easy. They don't know what it is to have a heartbreak, because the Lord just helps them. So be intentional. There's nothing to be afraid of. Seek help, talk, pray. But also ultimately remember that your worth is in Christ and not in any created things. And so as you face the pain, you are valueless. No, you are valuable, not valueless. That's not right. You are valuable.
Listen to that part.
Yeah, you are valuable in Christ because He's redeemed you from your sins and He's given you His Spirit. And He's the one who's also put those desires to marry. So you can cope up with. Don't isolate yourself. Don't keep away from others. Keep a godly company. Seek advice. And lastly, to those who like asking people when I get married, some ask out of a genuine concern.
Yeah.
Others, it's just wanting to be nosy.
Yeah.
Be a bit sensitive. Be sensitive to what people are going through.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that very close relationship with a person, it's not your place to find out when they are marrying or getting married. Because after all, you don't even know where they stay. So why should you now bring yourself in that regard? So be sensitive, because this aspect of marriage affects us differently.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Pastor. You have answered these questions very well.
I hope so.
Yeah. Just for the sake of the audience, just in case this entire time you're not realizing how we were going about this topic. It started with the seriousness of marriage. Why is it such a big deal? Because from it, do we see where the pain is coming from? It's I'm not yet married. I'm in pain because of it. Why is it such a big deal? It's because of how it was designed. It's a divine institution. It's a covenant. And in it, God inbuilt in us the need of a companionship if you have been given the desire to get married. And that need of a companionship, that loneliness is inbuilt. God has actually put it. But the pain itself can be intensified for various reasons. That's why we looked at what keeps people being single. Sometimes you're the one who's keeping yourself being single because you've been too picky, because because of fear of settling, because of your look on God's sovereignty, and various other reasons, which is only making the pain worse. Other times it's your obsession with marriage that is making your pain even more than it needs to. But there is hope. There's hope in regards to how you can actually do this pain, get out of this place where you're going to bed and you're sleeping, you're staying in cars, and you're burdened by all these thoughts of why am I still single? Is it am I undesirable, and all these things? By just focusing, like Pastor had mentioned, focusing on building yourself to be the kind of spouse your spouse will be proud of, but at the same time learning who you are and who you're looking for in a spouse. That way you can easily spot when you see someone like that. Aside from that, it is focusing on your relationship with God, serving Him, and realizing that there's a lot more that needs to be done in this world than just get married. There's souls to be saved, and there's much ministry, much work that can occupy you during your times of singleness. So, yeah, this concludes our episode of Coffee in the Library, Not Yet Married, and It Hurts. Subscribe, comment what your experience with being single is, what you got from this, how it will help you. At the same time, like this video and watch out for the next episode.
All right. Thank you.